And we are recording. So my name is Trey Sherrod. I'm the Anacostia Riverkeeper here at Anacostia Riverkeeper. We've got Daniel here running the show for us. We've
Hey
also got
everyone.
Jay Sweeney here with us. Daniel, if you want to introduce yourself real fast.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm the Advocacy Associate at Anacostia Riverkeeper. I support Trey in a lot of our work. Great to have you all here with us.
And Dev, I did not hear you. I can see your chat. But just so everybody knows, we have several folks joining us from DOEE, including Gretchen, Dev, and Ariel. And apologies if I missed somebody else. We've also got a couple folks joining us from DOEE's contractor on the Anacostia River Sediment Project, Tetra Tech. So we have many experts in the room with us for when we get down to the Q&A, and they can provide us context as well as answers to any questions y'all might have. And Daniel, let's go ahead and move into it. So we've introduced Team Anacostia Riverkeeper already. We're going to move into background on the sediment project and the river, and then we will start moving into 90% design specific stuff. The Anacostia River is 8.5 miles long. It's our favorite little river. It's a 176 square mile watershed. Most of the river miles are in DC, but most of the watershed is actually up in Maryland. It runs through the heart of our nation's capital, and it connects all kinds of diverse communities. The Anacostia River Sediment Project is an enormous project. The map that is there is busy. That shows not just the entire work area of the Anacostia River Sediment Project, it also shows many of the landside toxic sites that are have contributed to the sediment that's being toxic in the river itself. But the work area for Anacostia River Sediment Project, ARSP, is the entire tidal portion of the river shown there, including the Washington Channel, even up into Maryland a little ways. It is to address legacy toxins, mostly polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. They're the leading kind of metric for how the cleanup will be going because of their toxicity at low concentrations and because of the relatively high concentrations that we're finding them in these hotspots. So right now, it is an interim record of decision. It is focused on what we're calling EAAs, early action areas. There are 11 early action areas in this work area, right? And so we're focusing on the hottest hotspots for this first initial phase of the Anacostia River Sediment Project. DC is the lead partner. Work is being planned by the district's Department of Energy and Environment. They're working with Tetra Tech. And then, of course, the sediment itself in DC is mostly owned by National Park Service. And so they have a pretty big hand in this as well. Planning is nearing completion. So we're over a decade into the ARSP at this point. And this is a public meeting to give you all a little more information on the 90% design for the remedial action, as well as to get your comments and questions before Anacostia Riverkeeper submits our formal comments later this week. One big piece of the ARSP is identifying PRPs, that is potentially responsible parties. There's going to be a lot of alphabet soup tonight. So we are trying to train folks on those acronyms, right? But we want to use the full terms as well. When everyone goes back into the fact sheets or even into the bigger documents at restoretheanacostiariver.com, we would like y'all to be as fluent as possible in all of the alphabet soup. So you'll keep seeing these terms followed by the acronym versions. DC is doing a pretty good job of holding PRPs accountable. PRPs include, but are definitely not limited to, PEPCO and Washington Gas, CSX, United States Navy, United States Department of the Interior, Bureau of Engraving and Printing, Architect of the Capitol, the District of Columbia, Joseph Smith and Sons, and some other smaller companies and legacy companies up and down the river. And that is not an exhaustive list. looking back, this is over a decade in now to the Anacostia River Sediment Project. Anacostia Riverkeeper and a whole crew of other advocacy groups, mostly nonprofits, got together in 2013. We did direct advocacy with district council, trying to get them on board with funding this work proactively. And I do want to be really, really clear about this. The district has not been under consent decree to do the river sediment project. That's how this would happen in a lot of other places. But the district Department of Energy and Environment and the district government writ large is voluntarily spending money and doing the research to then bring that money back in later from other PRPs. But this is all being done voluntarily. And that's a really, really big deal. That's a really big feather in DC's cap. And that's one I want to make sure that the public takes away well. So back in 2013, advocates persuaded district council that it would be in the district's interest to lead this rather than in a proactive way, rather than reacting to some kind of legal scenario. The district council agreed. They moved money into the capital budget, and that began the remedial investigation and feasibility study process of this work. So you can see that in 2014, money gets going, and the RI, that's the remedial investigation, begins. The RI is how much of which chemicals are where, and how bad are they for humans and for the animals and for wildlife and the environment itself. In 2016, that draft report came out. They began work on the draft feasibility study, the FS. The feasibility study is, okay, knowing how many of which chemicals are where, what can we do about it? What are the options for addressing those chemicals to get rid of the risk right now to wildlife and ecology and to human health? And how much will those risks cost? And how can we prioritize those different remedies? In 2019, we moved into the final remedial investigation and feasibility study reports, and DOEE published a proposed plan. And then in 2020, the interim record of decision, the ROD or IROD, was published. There were slips, probably about 2 years over the course of this decade. I think the original date for the ROD was going to be 2018 and then 2019, but it was published in 2020, which takes us to now. So the district published their basis of design report. They also conducted and published their treatability study, looking at different scientific questions about how they would actually handle the sediment and how to get toxics out of it, how to dewater it, all kinds of things that would address kind of the nitty-gritty questions before they went into design, during early design. And then this year, we've had 60 and now 90% design reports. This is pushed into 2025 only because Anacostia Riverkeeper asked for an extension. It's a big deal. It was around the holidays that the old extension was, or the old comment period was going to close. And we wanted to make sure people were able to work on this and the public was able to see this a little bit longer. So we are pushing just into 2025 now on the 90% design report. The district will take all of these comments that we're going to ask y'all to give to them, and they're going to whip those into the 100% design report, which should come up pretty soon. They will be beginning, they've already begun some baseline and performance monitoring. Then this will move into bidding and procurement later on this year. Construction expected in about a year for the first actual physical work. This is the entire work area again, but without so many of those little side sites going on. The areas that are in color are the early action areas. We're going to zoom in on these, so you don't need to be squinting too hard or trying to zoom in too hard on these. But this is to give you a full river scale. So that's the Washington Channel coming up from the bottom. You can see 3 EAAs down there, those early action areas. You can see several early action areas on either side of the South Capitol Bridge up to Navy Yard. And there's a stretch up until about the south end of Kingman Island, and then the middle way up Kingman Island. And then finally, there's one that's hard to see on this map, all the way at the north end of Kingman Island, over there by Kenilworth Park. So we can start to zoom these in. This map is zoomed in on the Kingman Lake early action areas. And this is where I want y'all paying attention to colors. So the yellow dashed line is the channel that is still to be dredged. Dredging is where they're going to be bringing machinery in and digging up the sediment. So they're going to deepen the channel here to help improve flow in those wetlands that are man-made. By improving the flow in the channel, that should also take a significant amount of erosion stress off of the rest of the remedy going in there. Around that teal spot that you can see top left, that is going to be in situ treatment. That is in place treatment. There are wetland areas right there. And so DOEE and Tetra Tech are looking at doing amended carbon work there. So by using activated carbon, the same way that someone who has been poisoned can go into the ER and be given charcoal, right? Charcoal is just a form of activated carbon. It actually binds up those toxins that we're worried about moving around in the ecosystem, and then it keeps them from being bioavailable, and it should keep them out of the food chain going forward. The orange spots here are amended capping, and so the amendment, again, is that activated carbon. Capping is where they're going to lay down a layer of clean sediment. Activated carbon mixed into that to help soak up any chemicals that do make it through there. And what that does is it creates a clean bed for all of the worms and other invertebrates that live on the bottom of the river to be active. Those worms and other invertebrates, mussels, clams, insect larvae are always turning the sediment. They're actually feeding a lot of them off of the sediment. And so they move that sediment up and down. What we want to do is remove that bioactive layer from contact with the high PCB toxics further down. And so amended capping is going to be the combination of a cap of clean fill on top, but with activated carbon mixed in. What is still hard to see, even zoomed in, is that there's a red stripe running down the middle. I'm not sure if y'all can see my cursor or not. Oh, there's Daniel's cursor. Thank you, sir. So right here in the Federal Navigable Beach Channel is a red area. That red area is where there will be dredging, and then amended capping below that. So in the federal channel, DOE and Tetra Tech have to get down back to the navigation depth. There's been a lot of sedimentation in the river, so they're going to cut that down a little deeper in the finished product, and then they will cap it back up to get back to the flush with the nearby sediment. And go to the next site. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll be glancing at that as we go along. These are the early action areas on either side of South Capitol Bridge, the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge, and Navy Yard. So you can see the South Capitol ovals there, the little plazas on either side of the bridge. There's one area here with dredging. That is the active fuel dock down there attached to Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. The other two areas here, right under the bridge and off of Navy Yard, are slated for amended capping. You can see the Federal Navigational Channel again there between those two blue lines. This slide moves us up to the Washington Channel. These early action areas are relatively deep water. You can see the federally navigable channel there, again in blue lines. This is going to be amended capping again. Now, Anacostia Riverkeeper is broadly in favor of much more dredging than capping for reasons we can go into in a little bit. But this site, Washington Channel, is particularly well suited to capping. It's deep water. It's not an area that's likely to be subject to too much erosive force, and it's a good spot for the capping to be used. As we're talking about the different remedies, at the bottom here is a breakout of how many early action areas are in which big operable unit. The Washington Channel has 3. There are 6 in the main stem of the river, and there are 2 big EAAs in Kingman Lake. The 3 in Washington Channel sum together to be about 14 acres, all slated right now for amended capping. In the main stem, those 6 early action areas make up 23.3 acres for a mix of dredging and amended capping. Kingman Lake, with only 2 early action areas, still has 12 acres that will be addressed in this project, including that channel dredging, amended capping, and then in situ treatment in the active wetland areas. You can see the image up top. The top part is in situ carbon treatment. So that's what we're talking about on the wetland area. That was the teal shape on that first map we showed you when magnified. The water has direct contact to the carbon layer, right, which has direct contact to the contaminated sediment. By doing it in situ, that means they're not digging it out. They're not covering it with several inches or a foot of other sediment. And so that is less likely to damage the environment that's already there. And that's a good use in those wetland areas because we don't have enough wetlands as it stands in this watershed. So we want to keep the wetlands that we have in good shape and then hopefully clean up the environment around them. That will be subject to ongoing monitoring, like the entirety of this project. And so we will be looking at the next dates where they check toxicity, hoping that that carbon was sufficient to get those toxicity levels down in those areas. But there is a plan in place, a monitoring plan going forward that is going to address any risks with that. The second half of that image shows an amended cap. So you have the contaminated sediment again at the bottom and the water above. You've got the carbon layer there, in this case 3 inches, but you've also got 9 inches of clean aggregate. So that is to create that new base layer, right? And that is an armored amendment. We included this slide just to show the difference in criteria right now between DOEE and National Park Service. It's the NPS. BU, beneficial use or beneficial reuse, is what you're going to see when you look at the documents. A big part of the explanation of significant differences document in this 90% design about how it's changed from 60% some months ago to now at 90 is the adding the use for the option for beneficial use. Anacostia Riverkeeper supports beneficial use. We think it's a good way to bring costs down, but only if we can be 100% certain that the sediment being used again is safe to be used that way. So NPS draws a little stricter delineation for what may be applied aquatically than DOEE is drawing right now. Both of them include options for checking it again. So if the sediment that is dredged up is amended with carbon, it might be able to be used again further out for beneficial use, depending on what that final toxicity level is on it. So there are some differences here on where they draw the line between safe and not safe, but both of them get down to the idea that you're going to check again to see what it is after it's amended. And then if they're greater than, if it's too toxic, then it's still going to go off to a hazmat site. And I just saw a question in the chat. Are there any plans in place for what to do with Native American artifacts if they are found during dredging? My understanding is that there's pretty standard regulations about having to stop a dredge if they find artifacts, and then extra due diligence to be careful in that area before they start digging again. I'll let Tetra Tech or DOEE jump in if they have any of the other details already planned. There are quite a few archaeological sites around Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. I agree. And this question came up in a previous public meeting as well. So this is not the only meeting to have interest in this. I will say that a lot of the sediment, where they're not dredging particularly deep. And so a lot of the sediment is likely to be new fill. That certainly doesn't mean that artifacts couldn't have been eroded from upstream in the watershed, even all the way up into Maryland, carried by stormwater down, and then placed in that more recent sediment. I'm not sure how likely it is, but I do expect that there will be plans for that, and that is something that we can help you keep an eye on. A lot of questions are going to come up that don't get addressed until during the contractor's design plan phase, right? This is the agency's designing, but there will be a contractor selected that contractor is going to have to do extensive detailed designs for how they're going to do the work. And we expect to continue having some community voice in there for questions just like this. But if Tetra Tech or DOE, if y'all have any responses to that question, y'all could jump into chat with further details. Daniel's brought us to sediment laydown areas on contractor staging areas. The orange crescent here is the laydown area at what is the Kenilworth Maintenance Yard. That's a National Park Service facility. The road going east-west right there. Below it is Benning Road. That is the Ethel Kennedy Bridge that carries Benning from the mainland over Kingman Island and then back across the main stem of the river over to the east bank. So the laydown area is set to be the Kenilworth Maintenance Yard. That is just above and just west of the Pepco Benning Road site there. This site is pretty good as far as community impacts go. It's close to the river, so it's good logistically for the dredges to be able to get sediment up pretty quickly. But it's also very close to the highway. And the route to the highway should only have an indirect interaction, right, with the communities. It's all industrial right there between the maintenance yard and Pepco. They have a direct on route to Benning Road there at the light. And then from Benning Road, they can very quickly get onto Highway 295 and be off of surface level streets and mostly out of neighborhoods. That is not to say there's going to be zero impact. I myself am a neighbor of this site. I am renting a place for a long time now in Kingman Park, just across the river. I frequently use that intersection there on Benning to get to and from work, as well as going up further into the watershed. So there will be increased truck traffic. That's going to be another thing that we want to track with the community as we go further down into those plans. We've got a question about RFK demolition and construction. For demolition, that is slated to begin, I think, the end of this month, maybe even next week. So demolition is going to be ongoing. I have not heard, frankly, what the end point of demolition is likely to be. But with it beginning now, and with this physical work not likely to begin for at least a year, I anticipate demolition would not have a whole lot of direct impact on that. Again, if DOEE or Tetra Tech, y'all want to jump in on expectations for that, you are certainly welcome to do so. There's still no plan yet for what's going to be constructed at RFK. So these timelines may overlap, but I'm not sure that they would have a whole lot of direct impact on this. It's not impossible. Daniel? The other sediment laydown area and contractor staging area will be just above the 11th Street Bridge. And was that a question from the call-in user? Maybe not. Let me know if you have a question since you can't come in on chat. So this is just upstream, east and north of the 11th Street bridges here. This is going to be the other area. Again, this will have a lot of impact, I anticipate, for traffic on the folks using Boathouse Row, in particular, Eastern Powerboat Club, which is right next door. This is the old Washington gas site. Army Corps of Engineers also runs some of their channel clearing, tree grabbing activities out of here. I anticipate there will be impacts to their activities. But again, those are things that we're going to want to follow up on in detail once the contractor is selected. Again, this does give very quick, mostly non-residential access to a highway. They're going to come off of this property onto the 11th Street bridges and be immediately onto 295. So compared to some of the other options that are out there for where these laydown areas might have gone, this one does a good job, again, just by location and proximity to the highway of removing some of the impacts, but they will not be completely free of impacts. And we want to mitigate those as best we can as the planning goes forward. We've got another question in the chat about freshwater mussel beds. I don't have a current map in my head of all the freshwater mussel beds. They are one of the groups of species that were of concern in the wetland. And so that was another reason why they wanted to avoid dredging in some of those areas in Kingman Lake. They co-occur often with wetlands. I'll let DOEE jump in if they have specific plans already for what they're going to do to mitigate harm to mussel beds if they're encountered in the middle of the work. Daniel, you can slide us along one more. So some outstanding questions. Again, these are going to need to be addressed once the contractor is selected. As I understand it from the previous public meetings, these are not going to be addressed even in the 100% design. Devin, Gretchen, you're welcome to tell me if I am wrong on that, but that these questions will need to be addressed between the agency and their actual construction contractor during the project itself. The big one is going to be, where will the sediment be taken that is too toxic for beneficial use? I know there were a list of, kind of a preliminary list of sites that might be used for it, depending on how toxic the material is going to be. But that is still to be refined, as I understand it. Speaking from the point of view of boats and giving boat tours, how will navigation be maintained around the capping and dredging operations in the water? Navigation plan is going to be something that we're going to be keeping a close eye on as we move forward. Both sediment laydown areas, again, have almost immediate access to highways. They're not right the smack in the middle of a bunch of residential areas, but there are still going to be traffic and other problems for neighbors and folks commuting through. So that is going to be something that we want to track, is what those trucking plans look like, scheduling wise, making sure to miss peak use times, trying to miss school and work commutes, and then making sure that we're not choking it up too much. So Riverkeeper has pretty much finished our comments on the 90% design. We are not submitting them until we have this meeting tonight, because we wanted to hear your other questions and comments in case we can amplify those in our comments to the agency. You are very welcome to submit your own comments, but don't jump to that slide yet. Broadly speaking, a lot of our problems with the ARSP happened earlier on. We remain very disappointed to see so much capping and so little dredging. The dredging is significantly more expensive, but it is significantly more permanent. There's no way for it to undredge itself. We really applaud the agency's use of the 2080 200-year storm expectations to design the caps that they're doing. That alleviates some of our concerns about the permanence of capping versus dredging, but it doesn't do a whole lot for the fact that a deeper river would be better able to handle flood events. And with climate change, we do expect significantly more big storms to be coming through this area. We don't expect more rain per year, but we expect any given storm to be larger and larger and larger, which means more water trying to come down the river at any given point in time. And yet we know that the river is also sedimenting in. It's getting actively shallower from year to year. In fact, some areas are getting inches shallower a year because of stormwater erosion and all the sediment that brings downstream. So with a river getting smaller, but rain events getting bigger, that seems like a pretty simple equation to be looking at more flooding as we move forward. So a deeper river and some extra dredging would be really valuable for that, even if it's not strictly only for the toxics alone. We also remain concerned that the district's fish consumption assumptions in this project do not go far enough to protect subsistence anglers, especially those who have already been exposed to a lot more toxics per fish in the past, when the fish were even more toxic than they are now, and that a lot of those anglers have been being exposed to toxic fish here for decades. They are not the hypothetical exposure model, right, where exposure starts from the time of consideration and that they start with a clean slate. They have been highly exposed already for a long time, and that doesn't even extend to other different environmental harms, right? A lot of these environmental harms are cumulative, and so it is difficult to set out the epidemiology of those because you have so many overlapping harms in lots of communities. Most of our most vulnerable people in this watershed, right, are the ones that are also likely to be exposed to fish consumption out of necessity rather than just for fun. And that is those subsistence anglers that we really want to see better protected. And Marion, yeah, we will be putting these slides out. And agreed, there are definitely going to be mussels in Kingman Lake. And I know that there have been comments on that throughout this process. I'll let DOE jump in with any other comments they want to make on how the any harmed mussels will be mitigated. All right, Daniel, you want to take it away to curate some Q&A?
Sure, we wanted to allow a space where we could just open up the floor, and if you have questions that we are able to answer, that anyone here from DOEE or from Tetra Tech is able to address, yeah, we would be happy to field those now. If you're muted, feel free to come off mute. Thank you as well for the questions that have been posed in the chat already. Yeah, Marion.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the question that I wrote in the chat, which is, I don't really understand how the laydown area can be used without rerouting the bike trail. Could you explain that?
I cannot, but I would be happy to kick it to anyone who could give us a little more information on that.
Steve, can you answer the question?
Sure, thanks, Dave. Yeah, so if we were to use that one, basically what we're going to be doing is dredging with using a dredge pipe to bring the material in, and there's a low spot with a bridge just to the south of that. We would route that under that bridge and then up the side so it would not impact the trail in that case. Some of the other areas that we're looking at, if we had to impact the trail, we'd probably either do a bridge up and over. We won't be closing the trail. We may have to reroute it, or not reroute it, but maybe build a bridge up and over some of our equipment. That would be probably the worst case, but we would design it such that it would be very shallow slopes and easy to traverse over. But in this case, on the maintenance yard, that one we wouldn't have to impact the trail, and then we would have fences around the site to prevent public access to the areas where we're working. So,
Stephen, will you just introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Steve Dillon with Tetra Tech. I'm the lead design engineer for the remediation project.
Thank you, sir. And so for getting under, you were suggesting that for the Kenilworth maintenance yard, y'all would bring the pipe under that little trail that goes over that little wetland that leads up to there?
Yeah, the trail's on that bridge there. We come under that bridge
Yep.
and then come up on the south side, yes.
Cool. And then would it go under Anacostia Avenue there as well, or would it have to go over that road?
It wouldn't. Well, the maintenance yard is on the west side of that, so basically we come in between the trail and the Anacostia Road. So we come up,
cool.
and then we'd be pumping it into the geotubes over there.
Cool, thank you. Marion, does that answer your question? I zoomed in on Google Maps, and that makes sense to me when I'm zooming in.
Well, it makes sense if they're dredging right adjacent to the site, but if they're bringing sediment from another location, are they going to dump it in the cove and then pump it in? I can't visualize
the dredge itself has cutter head on it and a pump, and so basically it cuts the dredge material out of the bottom of the river and then pumps it. It slurries it and pumps it all the way to the treatment spot. So it would remain in a pipe until it gets to the actual treatment area up on top of the maintenance yard.
So it's going to be a long pipe from, stretching way down the river. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that area is right in the middle of where we're doing most of the dredging. Most of the dredging that you were shown is either in Kingman Lake or immediately adjacent to it, and so the maintenance yard is right next to all of that. The only area that's going to be dredged that's far away is down to the south, over there by the Joint Base dock, and that one will probably be just mechanically dredged and placed in barges and carried over there. That's a very small
And
amount, though.
how
That's
is
only
it going to get off the barge into the dewatering area?
well, if they put it in barges and carry it over there, they'll have a crane. They'll have to be able to get down by the river. So in that case, you'd have to you wouldn't be able to pump it that way. So there would be another way. They can start it and pump it out of the barges. You know, that's going to be up to the contractor's means and methods. We're not specifying those. But and one other option, we're looking at other options too. One option would be to take it over to the Washington gas yard and basically take it out, truck it out that way. But it'd have to be treated first. And you can stabilize it and treat it in the barges. At an Exxon project we recently did, we treated it and stabilized it in the barges without taking it out. And then we took it out after it was stabilized and hauled it off in trucks.
Okay,
There's multiple
thank you.
ways to do it. Okay.
Yeah, and one other thing about the laydown area, it seems like it would be a good idea to have some idea what's going to happen with the laydown area after the project, so that you know that can be incorporated.
Yeah, the contractor will be required to restore the site at worst to existing conditions, but in some cases, if we're using NPS property, they may want something else, and so it would have a restoration plan that would be included in that design, in the final design.
Will that be available for public comment?
Anything in the design will be, yes. But I should defer to Dev or Gretchen for any additional comments on that.
Thank you.
Fred, and a question regarding more dredging versus capping. I think you have to recognize the fact that if you do more dredging when you have contaminated sediments below, you're basically making things worse there. So you need to be cognizant of the fact that the dredging will be more, I guess, it'll cause more disruption than of help. So therefore, in lieu of that, I think the capping is perhaps the best option for all those reasons there. So dredging is done only in the channels where we have to meet the navigational dredging requirements needed by Army Corps of Engineers. So I think we looked at these options and we feel that, perhaps in the best interest of all those conditions, taking into account, capping is the best mechanism for reducing the, human health and ecological risk there and the site there. So.
Thanks, Dev. We're going to keep pushing on it, and that gets to one of the questions in the chat. I think citizen pressure is going to be the one big way that we can lean towards that direction. It is late in the process, this being the 90% design. But there had been more dredging early on, and it's something that we would like to see brought back. The other really big concern, Dev, and it's my personal nightmare situation, right, is that if we spend public dollars putting down these caps, the amended caps, without dredging down first, and we find out later on, due to flooding events, due to ongoing toxicity monitoring from this project, due to who knows what else, that we should have been deeper, and we could have been deeper with this particular mobilization. It's going to be really painful to then dredge through publicly funded caps just to go down a little bit deeper and then cap again anyway. So I still think that this is an opportunity that we're losing to go a little deeper in a lot of those areas, especially with the sedimentation rates, what they are in this river. But that's why we have dynamic tension between us and the agency.
Another logistical
Marion.
question in the chat, just in case anyone can't see it. These slides available to the public. Yes, we'll be sharing these out once we share our comments as well.
Marion, leaning on your question about the bike trails, I did also want to note that and confirm with Steve for the navigability around the dredge pipe. Oftentimes the pipe it'll be submerged most of the time, or will it be floating and visible most of the time, with the opposite there for crossings? Or is that
so? Yeah, so normally
TBD?
they would float it, but in cases where you're going to have boat traffic going back and forth, they'll have to submerge it. So they can be both.
Yeah,
submerged.
That's been a real problem up at the Bladensburg Waterfront Park. You know, they put buoys on the line, and when the dredge is working, it pulls the buoys underwater. So, I mean, I've found myself on the wrong side of that line a few times, and it's pretty scary and dangerous. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how long, you know, you're planning on dredging during boating season? Like,
I mean, the estimate now is probably 4 months or so, about 34,000 yards to get all together. But I mean, the contractor will be required to keep navigation open. So, and you know, if they're having issues with the thing sinking and coming back up and stranded boaters, that's not going to be allowed. So that was somebody who wasn't paying attention apparently in the past.
Steve, are there any kind of documentation you can put into this design, and as it moves to 100% design, that will further box in the contractor on aspects like that? In particular, thinking about the fact that we have such a big paddling and rowing community on the Anacostia River.
Sure, in the technical specifications, we have some of that, but we can put in. So those are called performance specs. You know, when you can either detail exactly how they do it, or you can tell them here's the end result we want. And the end result we want is for it to maintain navigable. So we could put that in as one of the performance specs.
Okay, cool. It might be useful to specify, because depending on where the contractor is from, it may not be obvious to them while they're planning how many paddlecraft and rowing craft are going to be on the river, across how much of the river and how frequently. But they are such a big user group here. It's something. It's easy to like know that when you're here, but somebody coming in from somewhere else may not be obvious for them.
Okay, yeah, you can do that.
Other things, I wanted to reiterate some of our comments. So again, thank you to the agency and to Tetra Tech for considering the 200-year 2080 storm as a scenario that really does alleviate a lot of our concerns that we had at 60%. We're going to keep pushing for more dredging just because it is an opportunity now that we don't think we'll get back later. We'll see if that's enough public pressure to switch the design back a little bit. I did have a question for you, Dev, on channel dredging in the early action area on the south end of Kingman. Daniel, can you run us back to that map real quick? The language and the explanation of significant differences, which is Appendix A for anybody that's on here, I would definitely encourage you to read that one. It's only 8 pages, but it's a very approachable way to move from the 60% design to what's being proposed here in the 90% design. The chart suggested it was just removing some dredging, but then some of the supporting language made me worried it was removing quite a bit more dredging. Well, the dredging, Dev, in the EAA there in teal, is it going to be strictly that very narrow channel, or is it going to be everything that's not wetlands? The logic to protect the wetlands by amending in situ is something we support, but not if it extends way out into that channel area, which is not insignificant there.
No, I think the channel will be dredged as per the plan defined in the 90% design report. And the in-situ remediation is purely, designated to the areas of the wetland, where the area covers, entire EAA, so the KL3. So that's almost like a 10 acre. So again, the navigation channel, the channel is required simply because we're going to monitor. We have taken some samples. We'll be taking more samples and monitoring that to see to ensure that once we dredge it, the remnant or the residual sediments are still meeting those goals, and that's when we're going to cap it. We're going to put mended cap and then sand cap on top of that to maintain that channel. So the idea here is to keep the navigation channel open, and then every other areas that are need to be remediated, with the in-situ will be remediated. So there'll be pretty much, everything, in the wetland areas there. So there is minimal disruption there. So.
Okay. The dashed yellow line, I didn't know if that was the strict path of dredging or if that was simply to mark the channel and there will be dredging in the open water areas on either side of that. It's hard to see on the scale of the map.
Yeah, that simply mark the channel where we're going to be dredging. Basically, that's what it is meant for. So
Cool. Thank you so much. We're glad that DOE is keeping the dredging of channels in the south end of Kingman. We still think that the dredging of the channels in the north end of Kingman would still alleviate some of the stress on these early action areas. Almost all of the water, in my experience in Kingman Lake, almost 2 miles of it, moves in and out through this south end here where the black dot ends just south of RFK. And so I have trouble understanding the response to comments where the north end channels were thought not to have an impact on these early action areas. So we will be pushing for more dredging on this project in the north end of Kingman Lake as well. One concern, and Dev, correct me if I've had two different understandings. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you clarify the question for me? When you say north end of Kingman Lake, what area are you exactly referring to? Are you talking about north of Benning Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, those areas will be dredged, right? So I think pretty much we are dredging, everything from the from northern end to all the way to the southern end of the Kingman Lake.
Okay, I understood from the explanation of significant differences that, or maybe one of the matrix comments from 60% and 90%, actually, not the EAD, that the northern channels above Benning Road and Kingman Lake were being moved to a totally separate project.
I think they're going to still be done as part of this project. It's just a cost thing. Who's going to pay for it? So it's not part of the remediation, but it's going to be done still as part of this project. That's just purely a cost thing for NPS.
Cool. That I do still think it would. I think the logic is correct that those channels will alleviate erosion on the new areas built up down here in the south end. So we'll be including that in our comments.
Yeah, so that dredging is already there, and even though, as Steve said, it will not be part of circular remediation, but part of the other costs, so it will be part of the NRDA cost. So that will be dredged simply because we already have equipment, and I think it's more cost effective to in one mobilization to do all the dredging that's needed there, because we're already there. So it's just more inexpensive, so it makes perfect sense. Yes, the wetland project, which Ariel is leading, I think that will be a separate project by itself, on different tracks. So I think we are coordinating in every way to ensure that there is a clear understanding between, all the entities here, to ensure that, we're all working together here. So there's a clear communication and coordination happening, and I guess in all parts of the, scientific, understanding of the area there. So.
Thank you, Dev. Ariel, that is a pretty good segue. I've got a couple more things I'm going to round back, but do you want to go ahead and tee up a quick blurb about your project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Trey. So as Dev said, in addition to the remediation that's happening through the Anacostia River Sediment Project, DOEE is also focused on restoration. And so we are working with the National Park Service, and we have a contractor, EA Engineering, that we're working with to look at wetland restoration and habitat enhancement within Kingman Lake. So we are in the earlier stages of that right now. So we have design concepts. We have those out for public scoping right now. So since this is a partnership with the National Park Service, we are going through the Park Service's NEPA process. So the public scoping is done through the Park Service website. I'll drop that link in the chat so you can comment on so that's specifically on the wetland designs for Kingman Lake. And we will be having another public meeting for that tomorrow night. So if you want to get back on WebEx tomorrow night, we'll be going through some of the design concept ideas showing the maps of different things that we'll be doing. But we also have that presentation posted on the Park Service site, which I'll drop the link. So you can come to the meeting tomorrow and see the designs, or they're also posted right now on that Park Service site, and you can submit your comments through there.
Trey, I think you're muted.
It was such a good thank you to Ariel for that. For everybody who's listening and not reading lips, Ariel and Dev are both with District Department of Energy and Environment, and you can reach out to them as well. Susie, the dredging we're pushing for will be broadly to get dredging. The cost allocations are going to come out between the federal partners and DC and everything else through the federal lawsuit, and then through CERCLA and through the natural resource damages assessment processes that are all ongoing. So we're pushing DOEE and Tetra Tech to design more dredging, and then the actual funding piece is going to come out of all of those.
Okay, can you hear me? Trey,
can
you hear me? Okay. Chris, as you know, Trey, I'm frustrated. I've been listening to this cleanup of the sediment plan for what, 15 years? When did this start? And we were still here, and I don't see where the federal government has owned up or paid a dime. Now, I could be wrong because I don't get in on these calls all the time. Has the federal government paid a dime for this, or is it just the district government who's supported this cleanup? I'm directing that to you, Trey.
I am directing it to Gretchen because, to my knowledge, there's been a lot of federal participation in this work, especially with NPS and then with the trustees. Yeah, but I'm unaware of what money has been exchanged.
Well, you know, as you know, or I'm just looking for the notice that our Attorney General's office just issued a case. I'll put the link in the chat against the federal government. So, you know, there's a whole legal team. You know, we're kind of the technical team, and we, you know, work on all the items that we're talking about now. As Trey started out the presentation, yes, we've been very lucky in the district to have the district kind of lead off and say, we want to clean Anacostia River. So basically kind of front the bill, and then we're figuring out how we will, cost recovery is basically kind of the name of the game with the legal team. So not only for the cleanup project, you know, we also have natural resource damage assessment, which is the restoration part. So, you know, this is all going to be part of cost recovery. It will go on for a long time. So I will, you know, put that news report in on the case, and we'll see. You know, it's brand new, so we don't know how that's going to go. And we're working, you know, the legal team is working hard to figure out how we're going to pay for all the great things we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, why should DC pay for it all, Gretchen?
And Pepco's the Pepco settlement is also helping pay for a lot of this. Is that correct?
Yeah, but this is a lot. This is a lot more than Pepco. But why should DC pay for it all? I think that is, you know, DC rate. I remember when the Summit Foundation and Vanessa, not Vanessa, but you know, the old Vanessa at not you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
They did that original study 13, 14 years ago about the sediment plan and the last big things to be done on the Anacostia River. And now 15 years later, we have plans, but we have action? When are we going to get action to clean up the hotspots on this river? And is that the fault of the federal government? I know Gretchen and DOE have been working hard on this. I know Deb Morelli, who I don't really know, has been working hard on this. But when did the federal government, can we get them to pay up? I have to say, I always talk about this behind everybody's back, and so I might as well say it out here in a public forum. It's frustrating. It should be frustrating to the public.
Well, you know, as I noted, I just put the link to the OEG case, you know, the announcement of that case in the chat. So that's just occurred, I don't know, a week ago,
Yeah.
right? Not even.
Yeah.
So, you know, that, you know, as I said, we have the legal team that's working on this, and maybe had OEG, maybe had some of your frustrations, Susie. And so there's a, you know, we'll see how the path forward goes. And so it's certainly from you, from the advocate side, you know, keeping track of this. But I think there's, you know, certainly this lays the groundwork for participation from the federal government, and we'll see how, you know, how it progresses.
Gretchen, how do we track the money? If you know, you may not know, if the OAG recovers money through this lawsuit, how does the public track it? How do we track it for the public? How do we track it for the public, or how does the public track it? So we know where it goes.
You know, I think it's going, those questions can, you know, once there's a path forward of how this is going to work out, then, you know, certainly that can be something that the advocates comment on. So, you know, since this is brand new, I think we have to see how it goes. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that any of this is, I mean, this is all more or less public information. It's just that it's also new. So I can't really comment on it because I don't think anyone, you know, there isn't,
Yeah.
We don't know what the response is going to be yet.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, since we
Yeah.
had
No,
this
I mean, it's a
gathering.
good thought. And, you know, as you know, maybe great minds think alike. So, you know, there's been a lot of, you know, as we said, the legal part, you know, this is kind of more the technical team, but the legal aspect of, you know, any Superfund project or natural resource damage process is, you know, really also robust and certainly worth, you know, all of our attention as well, because that's how things are ultimately funded. But
On a different
how it goes.
angle of district and federal interactions, we had a question earlier in the chat. If DOEE wanted JBAB, Joint Base Anacostia Bowling's participation in the project, what component would it ask assistance in? Is that something that y'all had looked at already, especially with the dredging immediately off the edge there of JBAB?
Well, Ray, there is no early action area, anything of that sort near JBAB. So that area, we're not doing it, at least.
I was thinking of the dredging off the fuel dock there.
Oh, for the navigational dredging you're talking about?
The dredging, the right below South Capitol on that EAA right off of their fuel dock.
Steve, do you get it?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question.
There was a question in the
Yeah.
chat, Steve, about whether or not DOEE would be interested in JBAB's participation, or if they had already sought that participation. I asserted if y'all had asked them about working with them for the dredge material coming out of that area right at the fuel dock, right off of the campus.
Oh, you're talking about the Sunoco facility. Okay, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
go ahead,
I
Jack.
mean, we've been talking, and I guess since that dock is used specifically for delivering the fuel to the JBAB, so they need to have a minimum depth requirements, and also that current depth requirements will not be met since the early action area is in that specific hotspot location, where the dock is. So the for requirements, we need to dredge that material. So in terms of um, coordination part of thing, yes, we are coordinating with them on these events that are unfolding right now. So
Okay, cool. So there is current and solid contact between DOEE, Tetra Tech, and Joint Base Anacostia Bowling.
Are you on
Yeah.
camera?
And this is Mark Shoup, and the EAA there's some outfalls that don't source
No.
onto JBAB. They come from off that site, and in the city there. I don't know that there's just not, it's probably those outfalls much more than JBAB in that place. I'm not saying they're not liable anywhere else in the river, but on that particular EAA, it's probably an outfall that's the culprit.
Cool. And I think the original chat question may have been whether or not DOE was had asked or wanted assistance from the campus, from the base on any of that work. But that can be hashed out more later. If the commenter brigade if you have a follow-up, throw it in the chat. But we'll let that one rest for a second. Marion had a couple other questions in the chat. One, will the work of other potentially responsible parties be included in the River Sediment Project? I know y'all are dovetailing the river-wide work with the individual landside sites, the PECs. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that to everyone else, Gretchen or Dev or Team Tetra Tech?
I think the only other, site that is a little bit further is PEPCO. So they're into their feasibility study, and I think coming out of the proposed plan. So we are part of all the review and process and everything. So we are providing the comments. So we'll be monitoring, those sites, and obviously the Navy Yard still kind of in the proposed plan phase. So those are the two sites that are a little bit more advanced, in terms of their, at least remediation components, in the water side. And land side, I think PEPCO is doing right now the feasibility study, with a plan to remediate a small portion of the area there. Again, that I don't think I have Apurva here, and she's the RPM for that site, and she's more involved, and she's more cognizant of the current, status on those projects there. So.
Cool. Thank you, Dev. The other question that Marion had, and she's just dropped off, so be sure to share this with her if she's not still on. With the capped areas, amended and otherwise, will they be subject to damage by waiting, or are they going to be pretty durable to waiting?
They should be pretty durable. So if they're because we designed for the 2080 storm, some of them are gravel. A lot of them are sand in the deeper water. But when you get up near the shorelines, you have more stress, and so some of those are gravel, and they're 9 inches thick. So unless somebody's actually out there digging, they should be okay. And we'll probably have signs out there to talk about not damaging the caps.
Cool. Thank you. I'm scanning back down. Oh, we had a follow-up about the likely interest from Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. Devin, I think Gretchen, you already put your info in there, but will the DOE and Tetra Tech folks, will you all please share your contact info in the chat, just in case anybody didn't see it or if they have follow-up questions? Gretchen, thank you for the note about the upcoming this weekend, January 25th, PEPCO Benning Road landside proposed plan meeting. And that public comment has been extended as well. That one is pushing into middle February. I want to remind everybody now that this comment period for 90% design of the Anacostia River Sediment Project is going to close February 3rd. So that is just around the corner. Dev, I had another question for you. Early on, I thought that the agency was leveraging a lot of the sampling effort for this, even if the funding was different. to get some PFAS sampling, some polyfluoroalkylated substance sampling on the books for the river. Is that incorrect, or is it happening but it's just not part of the ARSP, or is that not happening at
Yeah,
all?
no, that's incorrect. It's not happening right now because I think, as I said, the focus here is the PCBs are the driver for the ARSP, and that's exactly, we've been working on all along from 2013. So PFAS being a new emerging contaminant of concern. So starting from focused, investigations at some of the DOD sites, where, it has been widely used, I think that should be a starting point. And I think we have to see, how much progress will be made in the next few years before we, make an effort along those lines for the PFAS, contaminant, in the sediment, So, so I think since we are focused on this particular, remediation for PCBs, so we want to keep that focus because everything is funded and directed, for cleaning up the river, based on the record of decision. So I think we kind of need to stay grounded, to those requirements for now. So
Given that a lot of the PRPs are probably shared for PCBs and PFAS, and given that a lot of the remedial activities might address both, one of the comments that we're going to submit to you tomorrow is definitely going to be that we'd like to see PFAS analysis of all these samples that are going to be happening for the baseline and then all the ongoing performance monitoring be included in that. We'll follow up with you more on that, but for the folks asking what else they can comment on, we would appreciate help pushing DOEE and Tetra Tech to write in PFAS analysis, PFAS analysis into their ongoing monitoring. It seems like an opportunity it'd be silly to miss with the scale of the effort that's going to be mobilized in the coming years to oversee how this project is doing, to not go ahead and get that data while those boats and those teams of professionals are already out there doing other sampling. So you can expect to see that one from us and potentially from some other folks. I had one last technical question.
Hey, Trey,
Yeah,
I
Dev.
want to clarify. We have completed the baseline sampling already. Okay, so I think it's already samples are in the lab right now. So I think that task is complete, baseline sampling. Okay, so that's all I can tell you right now. So
Cool, I appreciate that. We'll specify monitoring then when in that comment. My other question was, were there any concerns? Have y'all seen any concerns or had concerns yourselves about the powdered activated carbon or about any of the dewatering compounds that you're expecting to use?
I don't believe so. Steve, can you just answer the question? I think there are two, I guess, chemicals we talk about. One is the activated carbon. The other one is for dewatering the sediments. So, Steve, why don't you just answer and clarify those questions?
Yeah, so for dewatering, we put a polymer in there that just flocculates the sediment together so that it doesn't go through the bags. We're using filters to take it out. The polymer, though, that polymer is short term, it's short lived, and so once the sediment dries, the polymer will be gone. As far as the activated carbon, the pattern activated carbon, it will have some short term impacts. But and if you look back in the 60% design in the back there's a study back there that talks about short term, like in situ treatment versus particularly capping. And if you do capping, you've basically taken out the wetland or the benthic community for 10 years. It takes about that long to come back. But we're expecting this short-term impact to be over in less than a year. So within a year, we expect to have the wetland back to the way it was before. And the short-term impact comes primarily because the carbon just takes it'll take a lot of the nutrients out as well as everything else. And so it takes a little bit of a while for the adjacent sediment to get on top of there and add the nutrients back in there.
Okay, yeah, I read that part last night, but I wanted to just double check to see if I had missed anything. For the dewatering compound, what does it break down into?
I'm not a chemist. I have to ask my chemist. I'm a civil engineer. That's why I didn't like chemistry, so I went into civil engineering. But I'll have to ask my chemist and see what it breaks down into.
Cool. Thank you. We're probably going to include that in our comments as well. So you can go ahead and prep them to be looking for that.
Yeah, so that would be applicable to anything that goes back for beneficial use, probably in the water. But for the stuff that goes to landfill, it probably, it's not that important. So
Okay, cool. Any last questions before we move to how to submit comments? All right. Susie, are you leading us on how to submit comments, or shall I knock that out?
What's that, Trey?
Did you want to tell everybody how to submit comments, or shall I knock that out for it?
Yeah, maybe you should, because I can't really see that well on this
Yeah.
computer.
Happily. So
Okay, good.
we have
Thank you.
requested an extension on the comment, so it is now going to close February 3rd. That's still coming up right around the corner. Comments should be titled 90% Design Report, ARSP comments. They should include your name and how to get hold of you, as well as the comments themselves. Written comments can be submitted to the form with the link on the screen right here. And again, we will put these slides out. You can also submit them by email directly to doee.sedimentproject@dc.gov, or you can mail or hand deliver them to DOEE's physical offices on First Street. I want to thank you all for your time on this very, very, very cold evening out there. Barring any final questions or comments, it's been an excellent meeting and we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'd like to say, Trey, is thank you to you and to Daniel for pulling this together, and for Gretchen and Dev for attending and answering questions and presenting a plan. Talking about what DOE is doing. And I guess Steve Delhome, thank you, because the public has a right to know what's going on. And maybe there are only a few people here from the public, but we need to keep telling them what's going on, because that's what it's all about, and that's what our role is. And I want to thank you, Trey, and thank you, Daniel, for pulling this together.
Thank you,
We're
Susie.
not a big organization, so it's not easy for us to do. And Ariel, thank you for joining in.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you again, Daniel, for all of the edits and help support. Thank you to all of Team DOEE and to all of Team Tetra Tech present. I see some water quality monitors and some partners and some neighbors that I recognize by name in the public section, as well as some public I don't recognize. So thank you again to everybody for tonight. We will be posting this up.
Can I have a question? Can I ask a question to the group?
Yeah.
Stephen Delhome, would it be beneficial or not to have something with Tetra Tech presenting to the public?
I mean, we're happy to do it if Dev and Gretchen want us to. I don't know. How beneficial
Well,
it would be.
we have our leadership.
I mean, I'm
council
just
meeting.
asking. Consider me ignorant, but what am I? I'm just asking.
Well,
Well, what I would say, there's always room for more meetings, but we do have the leadership council meetings, which are quarterly. Tetra Tech always has one or two presentations right now. Like in the last one, which was December 12th, Steve did a good presentation on the 90% design there. And then that was followed up by a public meeting specifically on the 90% design. What we do is for the leadership council meeting, where we get over 100 people at those meetings, and they're recorded and on our website. So if you're not around during the day, you certainly can catch up with them.
Okay,
We solicited, what people want for topics.
How do we get those out to the community at large? I mean, you see the same suspects at the leadership council.
Well, that's 100 people. So there's a lot of people in that meeting. How do we get that out? I have my list. It's like 500 people get that on their calendar, and it expands all the time. So So I feel pretty good about that one. I mean, there's always someone who's going to say, no one told me, but it does expand all the time because people then forward these. So I see all these forwarding. So, my hesitance in having another meeting is because that meeting is so big. Another meeting would just, to get that level of response is actually really difficult. And that meeting's been going on since 2014. So it does sort of serve a good purpose. But, as I said, we're always open to different ideas.
Gretchen, when is the next public input on the River Sediment Project writ large? Will there be public input at 100% or not until the contractor starts making choices?
Yeah, I think we're doing 100%, aren't we? I think we are.
No,
Probably. Yeah, and Deb,
this-
we're always deciding on that. It depends on how this one goes also. So
yeah,
anyway.
I think, right now I think 90% is where the public input is critical. That's when we had a public meeting. So I think we have to see, I mean, obviously, if there are major changes, happening between 90 and 100, then I don't know. We have to again look at the comments and see what kind of a response we're going to see, and then we'll make a decision based on that. So
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys.
yeah, thank you very much again, giving us an opportunity to be here and answer all your questions. Again, feel free to reach out. We have given our email addresses, so we appreciate your time and have a pleasant evening. Right?
Everybody
Bye
stay
now.
warm.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and
Have a
thank
good
you
night.
for your dinner time, sharing your dinner time with us.
Yep. Bye-bye.
See y'all.
Everyone, take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.